Imagine looking into the eyes of your long-lost brother, the only family you have left, and having to pretend he's a stranger just to keep a roof over his head. Harper Davis didn't just take a job, she infiltrated a fortress of wealth to save her own flesh and blood. She scrubbed floors for a billionaire who looked at her with suspicion, unaware that the nanny he was humiliating was the only true mother figure his ward had ever known. It's a twisted game of fate where money tries to buy silence, but blood screams the truth. We live in a cynical world where the system often tears families apart and hands the broken pieces to the highest bidder. It forces us to confront a brutal question: how much of your own dignity would you swallow to save the person you love? Would you let a cruel tycoon mock your poverty if it meant one more hour with your brother? This story digs deep into that pain, exposing the raw nerve of what it means to sacrifice everything for family. This isn't just a story about a rich family and their hired help. It's a shattering journey of secret identities, heartbreaking betrayal, and a love so fierce it challenges the boundaries of class and power. You are about to witness a psychological war between Harper, a sister armed only with courage, and William, a guardian with a heart of ice. From a humiliating interview to a shocking discovery that nearly destroys them all, the stakes couldn't be higher. Before we dive into this emotional roller coaster, I need you to make a choice. If you believe that family is worth fighting for, no matter the cost, then you belong in this community. Hit that like button to stand with Harper, share this video to spread the message that love outweighs gold, and subscribe right now so you never miss a story that touches the soul. Let's find out if a sister's secret is enough to melt a billionaire's heart. The iron gates of the estate towered over Harper Davis like the bars of a golden prison, a stark reminder of the rich family world she was trying to infiltrate. Stepping onto the manicured grounds, she felt a familiar tightening in her chest, a mix of adrenaline and dread that no amount of preparation could truly soothe. She wasn't just another applicant desperate for a paycheck, she was a woman on a life-changing mission, carrying a secret identity that felt heavier than the worn-out bag on her shoulder. The sheer opulence of the place was designed to intimidate, to make the help feel small, but Harper straightened her spine. She had to be the perfect nanny, even if it meant swallowing her pride until it tasted like ash. The interview process was less of a conversation and more of a sterile interrogation, conducted by a severe personal assistant who looked at Harper's resume as if it were something unpleasant stuck to her shoe. Every question was a subtle dig at her background, a reminder of the class divide that separated her from this world of billionaire privilege. "We require total dedication," the woman sniffed, her pen hovering judgmentally. "No personal drama." Harper nodded, forcing a polite smile while her nails dug into her palms. This was the sacrifice she had prepared for, enduring the condescension, the invasive scrutiny, and the feeling of being less than, all for a chance that seemed written in destiny. And then, just as the humiliation threatened to break her resolve, the library door creaked open, and a small, quiet figure peeked out. Time seemed to freeze, the air leaving the room in a rush. It was him. The boy from the adoption papers she had spent years tracking down. Seeing her long-lost brother in the flesh wasn't just emotional, it was a physical blow, a heartbreaking collision of joy and grief. He looked so much like the faded photograph she kept hidden in her locket, yet his eyes held a profound loneliness that no child should ever know. It took every ounce of her strength not to run to him, not to scream his name and bridge the gap between them instantly. Instead, she had to freeze, locking her emotions behind a mask of professional indifference. This was the cruelest twist of her love story. With her family to save him, she had to pretend he was a stranger. The boy looked at her with curious, sad eyes, sensing perhaps a flicker of the unconditional love radiating from her, but he said nothing. Harper felt a tear threaten to spill, a potential tearjerker moment she couldn't afford right now. Have you ever had to hide your true self to protect someone you love? It's a specific kind of agony that burns slowly. She swallowed the lump in her throat, offering him a gentle, reassuring wave that went unnoticed by the interviewer. The assistant followed her gaze and sighed, clearly annoyed by the child's presence. "That is the ward. He is difficult," she said, dismissing the boy's obvious need for connection as a mere inconvenience. Harper's heart hammered against her ribs. Difficult? No, he was just broken, likely starving for affection in this cold mausoleum. This moment solidified her resolve. This wasn't just about a family reunion anymore, it was a rescue mission. The drama of the situation was palpable, but Harper knew she was the only one who could see the invisible wounds on his soul. She would be his shield, even if he never knew she was his sister. "You're hired on a trial basis," the assistant finally announced, sounding bored, unaware she had just invited a revelation into their midst. Harper let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She had done it. She was in. But as the relief washed over her, a shadow fell across the doorway. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. It wasn't the boy this time. It was the master of the house, the man whose reputation for ruthlessness was only matched by his wealth. William Morris had arrived, and as his icy gaze landed on Harper, she knew the real test was only just beginning. William Morris didn't just walk into a room, he occupied it with the weight of a collapsing star. His presence was a physical force, cold and unyielding, immediately establishing the power dynamic of this rich family. He didn't extend a hand to greet Harper Davis. Instead, he looked at her with eyes that were like shards of flint, assessing her worth in a microsecond. To him, she was just another potential liability, a stranger invading his fortress. "Let's be clear," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in Harper's chest. "You are here to ensure he survives, not to be his mother." The sting of his words was intentional, a preemptive strike to maintain the emotional distance he so clearly prized. He handed her a leather-bound binder that was thicker than a phone book, the rulebook. It was a manifesto of control, listing every minute detail of the child's schedule with military precision. "No deviation," he warned, tapping the cover with a manicured finger. "No unauthorized outings, no unapproved snacks, and absolutely no emotional coddling." It was absurd. It wasn't a guide for raising a child, it was a manual for maintaining a piece of expensive furniture. Harper took the binder, feeling the weight of the sacrifice she was making. She wanted to scream that children need chaos and hugs, not schedules and silence, but she bit her lip. If you were in her shoes, could you bite your tongue to save a family member? The atmosphere in the house was suffocating, a gilded cage built by a billionaire who mistook control for care.
Harper quickly realized that William Morris viewed the boy not as a long-lost brother or a son, but as a duty he was ill-equipped to handle. He watched Harper like a hawk, his suspicion palpable in every interaction. If she lingered too long reading a story, he was there, checking his watch. If she laughed too loudly, he would appear in the doorway, a silent specter of disapproval. It was a high-stakes game of drama, where one wrong move could blow her secret identity wide open and get her thrown out before she could truly help. Yet, amidst the impossible rules, Harper saw the cracks in his armor. She noticed how he flinched when the boy cried, not out of annoyance, but out of a terrifying panic he tried to hide. He wasn't just cold, he was terrified of feeling anything, perhaps paralyzed by a past heartbreaking loss that made him view unconditional love as a weakness. He had built walls so high that he couldn't see the damage he was doing. Harper knew she had to navigate this minefield carefully. She wasn't just a nanny, she was becoming a negotiator for the boy's soul, fighting a silent war against a man who had everything but knew nothing about the heart. The tension reached a boiling point on the third day, when Harper tried to introduce a simple finger-painting activity. William descended upon them like a thunderhead. Mess is not structure, he barked, vanishing the paints as if they were contraband. The look of disappointment on the boy's face was a tear-jerker, a silent plea that shattered Harper's heart. She looked at William, really looked at him, and saw a man trapped in his own rigidity. Is it protection or control? Sometimes the line blurs until it chokes you. She cleaned up the table in silence, her compliance a mask for a growing rebellion. She realized then that saving her brother would mean breaking every single one of William's rules, one by one. It was a test of endurance. Every morning, Harper woke up knowing she would be scrutinized, judged, and likely belittled. But every time she saw her brother's face, the resolve hardened in her gut. This was her destiny, and no amount of icy glares or impossible demands would deter her. She began to find malicious compliance in his rules, finding loopholes that allowed her moments of genuine connection with the child. If no unapproved snacks was the rule, she'd accidentally drop a cookie. It was a dangerous dance, a love story of sibling devotion played out in the shadows of a mansion that felt more like a museum. William's suspicion, however, never waned. He installed cameras in the playrooms, a move that screamed of his inability to trust. Harper felt the lens on her back, a digital eye dissecting her every interaction. It was invasive and insulting, but it also fueled a strange fire within her. Let him watch, she thought. Let him see what actual care looks like. She poured extra warmth into her voice, extra gentleness into her touch, performing a play of affection for an audience of one. She was challenging him without saying a word, daring him to find fault in unconditional love. But as the days turned into a week, the strain was undeniable. The contrast between the boy's needs and William's demands was becoming a chasm she couldn't bridge with silence alone. She was walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers, balancing her secret identity against the urge to shake William by the shoulders and scream the truth. The revelation was bubbling under the surface, waiting for a trigger. And in a house this cold, built on secrets and repressed emotions, a spark was all it would take to burn the whole thing down. The opulence of Moore's estate was nauseating in its perfection. Crystal chandeliers caught the light in ways that dazzled the eye, and the floors were marble so polished you could see your own tired reflection in them. Yet, amidst this billionaire splendor, there was a deafening silence. Harper Davis watched as trucks delivered toys that cost more than her annual rent giant electric cars, life-size plush animals, intricate train sets all dumped into the playroom like cargo. It was a shocking display of material wealth trying to plug an emotional black hole. The boy didn't need a mountain of plastic. He needed a hug. William Morris moved through this world with the ease of a king, discussing mergers and acquisitions on his phone, while walking right past a child who was reaching out for him. It was a scene of heartbreaking irony. Harper stood in the corner, her hands trembling at her sides, forcing herself to remain the silent nanny. She wanted to shout, to grab William's arm and force him to look at the tear-streaked face of the boy he was ignoring. But she couldn't. Her secret identity was a gag order she had placed on herself. To speak up was to risk being fired, and to be fired was to abandon her long-lost brother to this golden solitude. Dinner time was the starkest example of this dysfunction. The boy sat at one end of the table long enough to land a plane on, served gourmet meals by staff who were paid to be invisible. William often ate in his study, or worse, sat at the other end of the table buried in a tablet, the blue light illuminating his indifferent face. The clinking of silverware was the only conversation. Harper watched from the sidelines, her heart aching. What is the price of childhood? Surely it's worth more than a silent dinner in a mansion. It was a drama of neglect played out in high definition, and she was the unwilling audience. She saw the boy shrinking, physically and emotionally, under the weight of this luxury. He was dressed in designer clothes that were stiff and uncomfortable, treated like a doll to be displayed rather than a child to be held. Harper's instinct was to scoop him up, to strip away the itchy velvet and put him in soft cotton, to take him out to the dirt and let him play. But William's rules were absolute. Appearance is everything, he had said once. It was a life-changing realization, for Harper poverty wasn't just about money. This child was impoverished of spirit, starving in a pantry full of food. There were moments when Harper almost broke. One afternoon, the boy scraped his knee in the Gardena rare moment of unsupervised play. He didn't cry out for William. He didn't make a sound, conditioned to believe that his pain was an annoyance. Harper rushed to him, scooping him into her arms, whispering soothing words that seemed foreign in this harsh environment. William observed from the balcony, a silhouette of judgment. He didn't come down. He didn't check. He simply turned away, assuming the nanny would handle the mess. That turn of his back was a betrayal of his duty that seared itself into Harper's memory. The anger inside her began to calcify into a diamond-hard resolve. She stopped seeing the wealth as impressive and started seeing it as the enemy. Every expensive gift William bought felt like a bribe for the boy's silence. It was a sacrifice of the soul for the comfort of the body. Harper began to subvert this lifestyle in small ways. She pushed aside the expensive educational tablets and brought out cardboard boxes to build forts. She ignored the chef's complex menus and made the boys simple grilled cheese sandwiches when no one was looking. She was injecting humanity into a sterile lab. She knew she was judging William, perhaps too harshly, but the evidence was damning. Yet, she also sensed a strange hollowness in him. Was his coldness a shield? Was he a product of the same rich family neglect? It didn't excuse him, but added a layer of tragedy to the love story of this broken family. He was perpetuating the cycle, blind to the fact that he was creating another lonely ghost in the machine. Harper realized her job wasn't just to care for the boy, but to somehow wake the man up from his coma of indifference before it was too late. Keeping her mouth shut was becoming physically painful. Every time William gave a curt order or ignored a drawing the boy held up, Harper felt a phantom limb aching the sisterly urge to protect. She was storing these grievances, cataloging every slight. It was fuel. Have you ever felt anger so righteous it scares you? Harper felt it every day. She was biding her time, waiting for the moment when her silence would no longer be an option, knowing that when the dam broke, the revelation would flood this house and wash away the rot, no matter the cost. Under the cover of night, the dynamic in the Morris mansion shifted. When the lights dimmed and William Morris retreated to his study to worship at the altar of business, Harper Davis stepped into her true role. She would creep into the nursery, where the shadows softened the harsh edges of the room. It was here in the quiet that the nanny mask slipped and the sister emerged. She would sit by the bed, stroking the boy's hair, and hum the melodies that were woven into their DNA. These weren't just songs, they were an audible lifeline, a secret identity code that only the two of them understood. The lullabies were old folk tunes their mother used to sing, songs about resilience and unconditional love that predated their separation. As Harper sang, the boy's eyes would flutter, a look of confused recognition washing over his face. He didn't know she was his sister, but his soul remembered the sound. It was a tear-jerker scene night after night two siblings reunited by melody, separated by a lie. The bond was forming rapidly, a magnetic pull of shared blood and shared trauma. It was the only pure thing in a house built on transactional relationships. One evening, the door was slightly ajar. Harper, lost in the memory of her own childhood, was singing a particularly haunting verse about a boat lost at sea finding its way home. Her voice, usually hushed, rose with the emotion of the sacrifice she was living. Unbeknownst to her, William was walking past in the hallway. He stopped dead in his tracks. The song. It wasn't the generic nursery rhyme he expected. It was raw, filled with a heartbreaking longing that pierced through the thick oak door and unsettled him. He stood there listening, a frown creasing his forehead. He pushed the door open silently, observing the scene. The way the boy clung to Harper's hand, the way his breathing synced with her humming it, was an intimacy William had never achieved, nor understood. He felt a strange pang in his chest, a mixture of jealousy and confusion. Why did that song sound so familiar? Why did it make the air in the room feel heavy with destiny? He watched Harper's face, illuminated by the nightlight, and saw a depth of emotion that terrified him. It challenged his worldview that affection was a weakness. Can a simple melody melt a heart of stone? Instead of interrupting, William retreated into the shadows, shaken. The next day, his behavior was erratic. He watched Harper with renewed suspicion, but also with a strange curiosity. He asked her where she learned that song. Harper, thinking quickly, lied, "Just something my grandmother used to sing," she said, her heart pounding. It was a close call, a brush with revelation, but the seed was planted. The lullabies were doing more than soothing the child. They were acting as a subliminal frequency, disrupting the static of William's cold existence. The bond between Harper and the boy grew stronger. They developed secret handshakes, inside jokes whispered while William was on conference calls. They were building a world within a world, a fortress of joy inside the prison of the rich family. This connection was the boy's lifeline, pulling him out of his shell. He started to smile, really smile, for the first time. It was a life-changing transformation. Harper knew she was treading on dangerous ground. The more the boy attached to her, the more devastating her eventual departure would be. But she couldn't stop. This was her long-lost brother, and she would give him every ounce of love she had. William began to hear the humming even when Harper wasn't singing. It was an earworm of guilt and longing. He found himself standing outside the nursery door more often, drawn like a moth to a flame he didn't understand. The drama was shifting from a conflict of rules to a conflict of the heart. He couldn't reconcile the professional nanny he hired with the woman who seemed to hold the keys to the child's soul. The lullabies were a language he didn't speak, and it made him feel like the outsider in his own home. This secret bonding was a double-edged sword. It saved the boy, but it threatened to expose Harper. Every time she sang, she was declaring her identity to the universe, hoping William wouldn't decode the message. It was a beautiful, tragic love story of siblings, played out in whispers and hums. Harper knew the risks, but when she looked at her brother sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, she knew the risk was worth it. She was singing him back to life, one note at a time, unaware that the song was also slowly chipping away at the walls of the billionaire who stood listening in the dark. The inevitable clash came on a Tuesday, the tension finally snapping like a dry twig. William Morris had come home early to find Harper and the boy in the living room, constructing a massive fortress out of the cushions from the pristine, white Italian leather sofa. The room was a disaster of joy. To Harper, it was a breakthrough. The boy was laughing, loud and uninhibited. To William, it was anarchy. His face went pale, then red. "What is the meaning of this?" he roared, his voice silencing the laughter instantly. The rich family order had been breached, and his control was threatened. He didn't wait for an explanation. "You are completely overstepping your boundaries, Miss Davis," he spat, striding into the room and kicking a cushion aside. "I hired a nanny, not a chaotic influence. You are disrupting the discipline I have worked to establish." His reaction was disproportionate, fueled by the confusing feelings the lullabies had stirred in him. He needed to reassert dominance. "Pack your things. You're done. Get out." The words hung in the air, cold and final. It was a shocking dismissal, instantaneous and cruel. Harper stood frozen, the blood draining from her face. The betrayal stung, but before she could even plead her case, a sound ripped through the room that froze William in his tracks. It wasn't a cry, it was a primal scream of terror. The boy, realizing Harper was leaving, had thrown himself onto the floor, thrashing and wailing with a despair that was physically painful to witness. No, don't go," he shrieked, his voice cracking. It was a raw, unfiltered sound of heart breaking. Have you ever heard a sound that stops time? This was it. The boy scrambled toward Harper, latching onto her leg with grip of death, burying his face in her jeans. William stared, stunned. He had never seen the boy react like this to anyone. Usually, the child was withdrawn, passive. This explosion of emotion was a revelation. It was undeniable proof of the bond Harper had forged, a bond William had failed to create. The boy was hyperventilating, his small body shaking violently against Harper's leg. "Please don't make her go," he sobbed, looking at William with eyes full of accusation and panic. It was a heartbreaking tableau, the billionaire standing powerless against the force of a child's love for a stranger. Harper dropped to her knees, ignoring William, and wrapped her arms around her long-lost brother. "I'm here, she whispered, rocking him. "Sure, I'm not going anywhere." She looked up at William, her eyes blazing with ferocity that challenged him to tear them apart. It was a moment of sacrifice and defiance. She was daring him to be the villain, to physically rip a crying child from the only comfort he knew. The air crackled with drama. William looked at the mess of cushions, the sobbing child and the defiant woman, and for the first time he looked unsure. The silence that followed the screams was heavy. William ran a hand through his hair, his composure cracking. He saw the unconditional love flowing between them, and it shamed him. He realized that firing her now wouldn't just be an inconvenience, it would be an act of cruelty. He was trapped by the very emotions he tried to suppress. Get him under control," he finally muttered, his voice lacking its usual authority. He turned on his heel and walked out, but his retreat was admission of defeat. He didn't fire her. He couldn't. The scream had echoed in his soul, awakening a dormant conscience. Harper stayed on the floor with the boy until his breathing slowed, her own heart hammering. It was a victory, but a fragile one. She had stayed, but the target on her back was now bigger than ever. William knew she had power now, power over the child that he didn't possess. It shifted the dynamic from employer-employee to rivals for the boy's heart. This incident was a turning point. It proved that Harper was no longer just an employee, she was the emotional anchor of the house. The destiny that brought her here was weaving a web that William couldn't cut through with a paycheck. But as she held the boy, Harper knew the danger had escalated. William would be watching her closer than ever, waiting for a mistake that didn't involve a screaming child to save her. The tear-jerker reality was that her love was her greatest weapon, but also her greatest vulnerability. The atmosphere in the house following the almost firing was brittle. William Morris was looking for a reason, any reason, to prove that Harper Davis was a fraud. His cynicism, honed in the cutthroat world of billionaire business, couldn't accept that her devotion was genuine. He needed to prove she was like everyone else after his money. So he set a trap. It was a clumsy, arrogant move. He left a thick envelope, clearly stuffed with cash thousands of dollars sitting carelessly on the foyer table, right next to where Harper placed her keys every day. It was bait, pure and simple. Harper spotted it immediately. The flap was loosely tucked, revealing the edges of crisp $100 bills. She paused, looking at the money. It was more than she made in 3 months. It could help her pay off the debts she incurred searching for her long-lost brother. It could buy them a getaway car. For a fleeting second, the temptation of a life-changing some dance in her mind. What would you do if no one was watching? But then she looked up and saw the camera blinking in the corner of the ceiling. And even without the camera, her secret identity was built on a foundation of moral steel. She wasn't a thief, she was a sister. She picked up the envelope. Up in his study, William watched the monitor, holding his breath, expecting her to slip it into her bag. A smirk played on his lips, ready for the I-knew-it moment of redemption for his own cynicism. But Harper didn't pocket it. She didn't even count it. With a sigh of annoyance, she marched straight up the grand staircase, the envelope held visibly in her hand like a piece of trash she needed to dispose of. She walked right past the nursery and knocked firmly on William's study door. "Come in," he said, swiveling his chair, feigning surprise. Harper walked in and tossed the envelope onto his mahogany desk. It landed with a heavy thwack. "You left this downstairs," she said, her voice clipped and cool. "You should be more careful." Anyone could have walked in. She held his gaze, her eyes clear and defiant. She knew it was a test. He knew she knew. The air between them crackled with unsaid accusations. It was a moment of high drama, a silent duel of character. William stared at the envelope, then at her. The smirk vanished. He felt a flush of embarrassment, a rare emotion for him. He had expected greed, but he was met with aggressive integrity. "Thank you," he muttered, unable to meet her eyes. "I must have forgotten it." The lie hung lamely between them. Harper didn't let him off the hook. "I'm here for the child, Mr. Morris, not your wallet. Don't confuse the two." She turned and left, closing the door with a precise click. This moment was pivotal. It forced William to reevaluate everything. If she wasn't after money, what was she after? The mystery deepened, but so did his respect, albeit grudgingly. He realized he was dealing with someone who operated on a currency he didn't understand honor. It was a shocking deviation from the sycophants he was used to. Harper's refusal to take the bait was a slap in the face to his worldview, proving that not everyone had a price. Downstairs, Harper leaned against the wall, exhaling shakily. The sacrifice of leaving that money was real. She was struggling financially, but her mission was worth more than cash. She had passed the test, but the insult of it burned. It showed how little he thought of her. Yet, in passing this test, she had gained ground. She had chipped another flake off his icy heart. She had forced him to see her not as a servant, but as a moral equal. The incident shifted the ground beneath them. William stopped locking drawers when she was around. The suspicion didn't vanish, but it changed flavor. He was no longer worried she would steal his silver. He was worried about why she was so perfect. The love story here was one of earning respect in a battlefield of mistrust. Harper had won this round, proving that her unconditional love for the boy was the only gold she was interested in. And William, left alone with his pile of cash, felt poorer than he ever had in his life. Enter Jessica, the fiancée. She was a caricature of the rich family, elite, beautiful, sharp, and completely devoid of warmth. She viewed the boy as baggage and Harper Davis as a stain on the aesthetic of the house. She arrived for a weekend stay, sweeping in with an entourage of luggage and a cloud of expensive perfume that made the boy sneeze. Her presence immediately sucked the oxygen out of the room. She treated Harper not like a person, but like an automated appliance that was malfunctioning. The help? She called her, never using her name. The conflict came to a head during a garden brunch. Jessica was holding court, sipping mimosas, while Harper tried to keep the boy entertained nearby. Jessica glanced at Harper's shoes, sensible, worn-out sneakers that had seen better days. She let out a cruel, tinkling laugh. "Oh, darling," she said loudly to William, pointing a manicured finger. "Do we not pay her enough? Look at those shoes. It's positively tragic. I think the gardener dresses better." It was a public humiliation, a calculated strike to remind Harper of her place in the food chain. The drama was visceral. William shifted uncomfortably. He looked at Harper's shoes, then at her face. He expected her to flush, to look down, to be crushed. He waited for the nanny to crumble, but Harper didn't flinch. She stopped playing with the boy, stood up slowly, and smoothed her simple dress. She turned to Jessica with a gaze, so calm it was unsettling. "My shoes are worn because I spend my days running after a child who needs attention," Harper said, her voice steady and clear. "They are comfortable for chasing joy, not for standing still and judging others." The silence that followed was deafening. Have you ever seen dignity silence arrogance? It was a masterclass. Jessica's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She had expected a victim, she got a warrior. Harper continued, "And frankly, I'd rather have holes in my shoes and a hole where my heart should be." It was a devastating, classy burn, a shocking rebuttal that stripped Jessica's insults of their power. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't use profanity. She used the truth. William looked at Harper, as if seeing her for the first time. He looked at Jessica, who was now spluttering indignantly about insubordination, and then back at Harper, who had already returned her attention to the boy, dismissing Jessica as irrelevant. A strange feeling bubbled up in William Pride. He realized in that moment that the woman in the worn-out sneakers had more class in her pinky finger than his fiancée had in her entire designer-clad body. It was a life-changing perspective shift. Later that evening, Jessica demanded Harper be fired for her insolence. William, surprisingly, refused. "She defends herself well," was all he said, turning back to his work. It was a subtle betrayal of his fiancée and a silent endorsement of Harper. The engagement of Jessica was a business arrangement, a merger of billionaire empires. But Harper was showing him what real substance looked like. The contrast was blinding. Harper's dignity in the face of mockery became a legend in the household staff's whispers. But for Harper, it was just another battle. She knew women like Jessica. They were insecure bullies. She wasn't there to impress socialites. She was there for her long-lost brother. However, the incident drew a clear line in the sand. William was no longer just a neutral observer he had, in his own passive way, taken aside. The romance of the story wasn't blooming yet, but the respect was deepening into something that could eventually become love. As Jessica stormed off the next day, unable to handle the disrespect, the air in the house cleared. Harper and the boy breathed easier. And William found himself looking at Harper's worn shoes not with disdain, but with a strange urge to buy her the most comfortable pair of sneakers in the world, not as charity, but as an offering. The sacrifice of her pride had paid off. Buy her respect where money couldn't. The calm didn't last. Fate, as it often does in a drama, threw a curveball. A fierce storm battered the estate one evening, knocking out the power and plunging the mansion into darkness. The wind howled like a banshee, rattling the windows. In the chaos, a massive oak tree in the garden, weakened by the gale, came crashing down. It smashed through the glass of the conservatory where the boy had been playing with his toys, oblivious to the weather. The sound was like a bomb going off, shattering glass. splintering wood, and the roar of the storm invading the house. William Morris was in his study when he heard the crash. Terror, cold and sharp, pierced his chest. He ran towards the noise, shouting the boy's name. But Harper Davis was already there. She had been in the kitchen, but had sprinted at the first crack of timber. When William arrived, the scene was a nightmare of jagged glass and debris. And there, in the center of the destruction, was Harper. She had thrown her body over the boy, curling herself into a human shield just as the skylight shattered above them. Glass shards littered her back and shoulders. A heavy branch lay inches from where they were huddled. Harper was wincing, blood seeping through her shirt, but she didn't move. She held the boy tight, whispering the secret identity lullaby into his ear to drown out the thunder. "I've got you. I've got you," she repeated, her voice shaking but firm. The boy was unharmed, terrified but safe within the cocoon of her unconditional love. William stood frozen for a second, the image searing into his brain. This wasn't a job. This was heroism. He rushed forward, disregarding the glass crunching under his expensive shoes. "Harper," he yelled, his voice cracking. He helped him up, his hands shaking. He saw the blood on her arm, the cuts on her neck. "You're hurt," he said, his eyes wide with shock. "I'm fine," she insisted, checking the boy frantically. "Is he okay? Did the glass touch him?" She cared nothing for her own pain. Her only concern was her long-lost brother. It was the ultimate sacrifice. William ushered them into the safe hallway, calling for staff to bring first aid. As he watched Harper tend the boy, refusing help for herself until he was settled, something inside William shattered the last remnant of his icy detachment. He realized that this woman would die for this child. No nanny does that. Only a parent or someone who loves with a depth he couldn't comprehend does that. It was a heartbreaking and beautiful realization. The romance sparked in that hallway, not with a kiss, but with the sight of her blood shed for his ward. He cleaned her wounds himself. It was an intimate, silent act. He dabbed antiseptic on her cuts, his hands incredibly gentle. "You could have been killed," he murmured, looking at her with an intensity that made Harper breathless. "I wouldn't let anything happen to him," she replied simply. Their eyes met, and for the first time, the barriers were gone. He saw her, not the employee, not the fraud he suspected, but the woman. The tear-jerker moment was in the tenderness of his touch, an apology for every cold word he had ever spoken. This event changed the DNA of their relationship. William couldn't look at her with suspicion. Anymore, he could only look at her with awe. He felt a fierce protectiveness rising in him, a desire to shield her as she had shielded the boy. The destiny that brought them together had now bound them in blood and adrenaline. He realized he was falling for her bravery, her fire, her love. But with this closeness came danger. As he bandaged her arm, he noticed a birthmark on her wrist, a unique, crescent-shaped mark. He frowned slightly. He had seen that mark before in the file of the boy's biological family he had reviewed years ago. The revelation was hovering right there, inches away. The crisis had brought them together, but also brought the truth dangerously close to the surface. Harper saw his gaze linger on her wrist and pulled away, panic flaring. She had saved the boy, but she might have just doomed her secret. The birthmark haunted William Morris. It was a loose thread in the fabric of his reality, and being a man of detail, he couldn't help but pull at it. The intimacy of the storm had lowered his defenses, but his analytical mind was still churning. He went back to the agency files, digging deeper than he had before. He wanted to know who this woman really was, this woman who bled for a child she barely knew. What he found wasn't a confirmation of her sainthood, but shocking evidence of deceit. He hired a private investigator to run a deeper background check, bypassing the standard agency protocols. The report landed on his desk 3 days later. The photo on Harper Davis' resume matched, but the history was a fabrication. The university she claimed to attend had no record of her. The previous family she listed as references didn't exist. It was a ghost identity. The betrayal hit William like a physical punch. He felt sick. The woman he was starting to care for, the woman he thought was a hero, was a liar. His mind immediately went to the darkest places. Why fake a resume? Kidnapping? Extortion? Was the heroism during the storm staged? No, the blood was real, but the lie was also real. The conflict tore him apart. He sat in his dark office, the glow of the computer screen illuminating his stricken face. The romance that was budding withered instantly, replaced by a cold, hard fury. He felt played. A billionaire is used to people wanting something from him, and he had let his guard down. He dug further, looking for her real name. The investigator had found a trail leading to a small town, to a family with a tragic history of poverty and separation. He found a name, Harper. But the last name was different. It was the same last name as the boy's biological parents. The realization should have clicked then, but William was too blinded by the feeling of being duped to see the family reunion angle. He only saw the lie. She had infiltrated his home under false pretenses. He watched her on the monitors again, but this time with a jaded eye. He saw her laughing with the boy, and now it looked manipulative. He saw her secret identity not as a necessity, but as a weapon. The drama was internal, a storm brewing inside his head. He decided he needed to confront her, to catch her in the lie. He felt a heartbreaking loss, grieving the version of Harper he thought he knew. Have you ever found out someone isn't who they said they were? It destroys the foundation of everything. He called the agency, screaming at them for their incompetence. They were baffled. He realized she must have forged the documents with expert skill. This level of deception required planning, required motive, and in William's world, motive usually meant money or harm. He couldn't conceive of unconditional love driving someone to commit fraud. His cynicism was his blinder. The tragedy was in the timing. Just as they were connecting, the truther, at least the ugly part of it, severed the tie. He printed the report, the pages heavy with his anger. He was going to destroy her. He was going to protect the boy from this imposter. He convinced himself that her care was part of a long con. It was easier to believe she was a villain than to accept he didn't understand the full story. He summoned her to the study. The walk there felt like a march to the gallows for Harper, though she didn't know why yet. When she entered, she saw the papers on the desk. She saw the ice back in his eyes, colder than ever. She knew. The revelation had arrived, not with a hug, but with a glare. The life-changing journey was about to hit a wall. William didn't speak. He just slid the fake resume across the desk. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice deadly quiet. "Really?" The confrontation was brutal. William Morris didn't give Harper Davis a chance to explain. The moment she hesitated, searching for the words to explain the adoption and the sibling bond, he attacked. "You're a fraud," he sneered, standing up and towering over her. "A liar. You faked your way into my home, into my child's life. What was the plan? Ransom? Kidnapping?" The accusations flew like daggers. Harper's face crumbled. "No, William, please, it's not like that," she pleaded, tears welling up. "I love him. He's—" "Don't you dare use that word," he roared, slamming his hand on the desk. "You don't know the meaning of the word. You are a predator." It was a heartbreaking scene. The man who had gently bandaged her arm days ago was now looking at her with pure disgust. The betrayal he felt had turned him cruel. He didn't want to hear the truth. He wanted to hurt her as much as he felt hurt. He pressed a button on his intercom. "Security. Escort Miss Davis out." Now, Harper tried to reach him. "William, listen to me. He's my brother." But the words got lost in his rage, or perhaps he chose not to hear them. "Get out," he hissed, "before I call the police and have you thrown in a cell." The security guards arrived, burly men who grabbed Harper by the arms. The physical humiliation was the final straw. She wasn't allowed to pack her bag. She wasn't allowed to say goodbye to the boy. She was dragged out of the study like a common criminal. As they hauled her down the hallway, the boy appeared at the top of the stairs, awakened by the shouting. "Harper?" he called out, rubbing his sleepy eyes. Seeing her being manhandled, his face contorted in terror. "Harper!" he screamed. Harper twisted in the guard's grip. "I love you. It'll come back for you," she yelled, a desperate promise. William stepped in front of the boy, blocking his view, cutting the visual cord between them. "Take her away," he ordered, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. She was thrown out the front gates, stumbling onto the wet pavement. The heavy iron gates slammed shut with finality that echoed in her bones. She was alone in the dark, without her coat, without her brother. The rich family fortress had expelled her. She stood there, shivering, staring at the lit windows of the mansion. The tear-jerker reality of her failure crushed her. She had tried to save him, and instead, she had lost him completely. Inside, William picked up the crying boy and carried him to his room. But the boy fought him. "I want Harper. I want Harper," he wailed. William felt a surge of doubt, a prickle of conscience, but he crushed it. "I am protecting you," he told himself. She was a lie, but as he held the sobbing child, he felt empty. He had won. He had removed the threat, but it felt like a defeat. The house felt colder than ever. Harper walked away from the estate, the rain mixing with her tears. She was broken. Her secret identity had been her shield and her sword, and now it was her ruin. She had no money, no job, and now, no access to the only family she had left. The life-changing dream had turned into a nightmare. She felt the weight of the destiny she had failed to fulfill. But even in the depth of her despair, a spark remained. She remembered the boy's scream. He loved her. That love was real. William could take her job. He could take her dignity. But he couldn't take that connection. She wiped her face, a look of grim determination replacing the sorrow. This wasn't over. It was a setback, a massive, crushing one, but she wouldn't abandon her long-lost brother. Not now. Not ever. The days that followed were a blur of gray misery for Harper Davis. She returned to her tiny, drafty apartment, which felt even smaller and colder after the vastness of the Morris estate. Every corner of the room reminded her of her failure. She sat on her sagging mattress, clutching the old photograph of her and her brother, the only tangible link she had left. The separation was a physical pain, a phantom limb ache that never ceased. She had tasted the family reunion, held it in her hands, and had it ripped away. She couldn't eat. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the boys screaming her name as the security guards dragged her away. It was a loop of torture. She felt the crushing weight of the system of adoption agencies, the background checks, the power of a billionaire against a penniless girl. What chance did she have? She was David without a sling, fighting a Goliath who owned the world. The hopelessness was a heavy blanket that threatened to suffocate her. She tried to find a way to contact William, to explain. She wrote letters, long, pouring her heart out letters explaining the adoption, the separation, the sacrifice she made to find him. But she couldn't send them. She knew a security team would screen them, burn them, or worse, use them as evidence for a restraining order. She was paralyzed by fear of making things worse for the boy. What do you do when the truth sounds like a lie? She was trapped in her silence. Her friends, a few, she had tried to cheer her up, telling her to move on, to find another job. It was just a gig, they said. They didn't understand. It wasn't a gig, it was her life. It was her blood. Harper stopped going out. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the drama of her life playing out in her head. She imagined the boy alone in that big house, wondering why she left him. Did he think she abandoned him? That thought was the sharpest knife of all. She started walking past the estate gates at night, just to look at the lights. It was pathetic, she knew, but she couldn't stay away. She stood in the shadows, a ghost haunting the living, whispering the lullabies into the wind, hoping the melody would somehow carry over the walls to him. It was a love story of the most tragic kind unrequited presence. She was a nanny who cared too much, the sister who wasn't allowed to be a sister. Her financial situation crumbled. Without the job, the debts she had ignored came collecting. She faced eviction. The world was closing in on her. It seemed destiny was mocking her, dangling happiness and then snatching it back. She felt a deep resentment towards William. His cruelty, his refusal to listen had destroyed 2 lives. He was the villain of her story, the dragon guarding the tower. But in this rock bottom, in the quiet of her despair, the core of who Harper was began to shine. She stripped away the fear. She had nothing left to lose. And a person with nothing to lose is dangerous. She looked at the eviction notice and realized it didn't matter. Only the boy mattered. She stopped crying and started planning. She didn't know how, but she knew she would get back to him. The tear-jerker phase was ending, the survival phase was beginning. She was broken, yes, but she wasn't dead. And as long as there was breath in her body, she would fight for her brother. The redemption arc hadn't started yet, but the intermission was over. She wiped her eyes, stood up, and prepared to face the world again, fueled by the only thing stronger than a billionaire's wallet, a sister's unconditional love. Back at the estate, the silence was louder than any scream. The boy, whom William had claimed to protect, had withered. Without Harper Davis, the light in his eyes extinguished. He stopped playing. He stopped running. He simply sat in the spot where Harper used to read to him, clutching a small stuffed bear she had stitched for him. It was a heartbreaking sight. The vibrant, laughing child of a week ago was gone, replaced by a shell. William Morris tried everything. He bought more toys. He hired the best child psychologist money could buy. He even tried, awkwardly, to read the stories Harper used to read. But the boy just stared through him, his face a mask of profound sadness. When William tried to engage him, the boy would turn away, curling into a fetal position. It was a total rejection. The billionaire realized with horror that his money was useless here. You cannot buy a cure for a broken heart. Then came the hunger strike. The boy refused to eat. He pushed plates of his favorite food away, his small lips pressed tight. "Eat, please," William begged, kneeling by the chair, his voice thick with desperation. Just one bite. The boy shook his head, whispering a single word: Harper. It was a dagger to William's gut. The name hung in the air, a testament to the unconditional love he had severed. He was watching the child fade away before his eyes, and he was the cause. The staff whispered. They missed Harper too. The house had lost its warmth. William felt the judgment in their eyes. He was a master of the house, but he was the villain of the home. He spent sleepless nights pacing the hallway, listening for the boy's breathing, terrified he would stop. The drama had shifted from a battle of wills to a battle for survival. The boy's depression was a physical weight in the house, pulling everything down into a black hole of misery. One night, William found the boy humming the lullaby, broken, off-key, and filled with tears. It was a song Harper used to sing. Hearing it from a boy's small, trembling voice broke William. He retreated to his study and poured a stiff drink, his hands shaking. He looked at the empty chair where Harper had sat during her interview. He had been so sure he was right, so sure she was a fraud. But would a fraud inspire this level of devotion? Would a child starve himself for a kidnapper? The cracks in his certainty widened into canyons. He started to question the facts he had relied on. The fake resumed, yes, it was a lie. But why? Why would someone go to such lengths just to be a nanny? The pieces didn't fit the narrative of a criminal. They fit the narrative of desperation, of sacrifice. He remembered the look in Harper's eyes when he threw her out. It wasn't the look of a con artist caught in the act. It was the look of a mother losing her child. William felt a growing sickness in his soul. The tear-jerker reality was unavoidable. He had made a mistake, a colossal, life-destroying mistake. He had prioritized rules and background checks over human connection. He had thrown out the only person who could save the boy, and in doing so, he had condemned the child to this darkness. The boy's condition worsened. The doctor warned of hospitalization if he didn't eat soon. William was at his wit's end. He realized he had to solve the mystery of Harper Davis, not to prosecute her, but to understand. He needed to know the truth behind the lie. The boy's life depended on it. The redemption of the household hinged on the very woman he had banished. Driven by a mix of anger and desperation, William Morris decided to dig until he hit bedrock. He told himself he was building a legal case to keep Harper Davis away for good, to prove to the boy that she was bad news. He went to the address the investigator had found in the small town, the rundown archives of the county clerk. He wanted to see the origin of the lie. He wanted to find the dirt that would justify his cruelty. He sat in a dusty government office, sifting through boxes of old records. He found her birth certificate, Harper Davis. Real name, he traced her family history. Parents deceased in a car accident 10 years ago. A tragedy. And then he found the connection. A younger brother, taken by the state, placed into the foster system. The name of the brother was the name of his ward. The boy. The revelation hit him like a bolt of lightning. William froze, the paper trembling in his hand. He read it again. And again. Sister. She was his sister. The adoption papers that William's own lawyers had processed years ago were there, referenced in the file. The boy had been separated from Harper because she was too young to care for him. She had lost him to the system. And for years, she had been looking for him. The fake resume, the lies, the secret identity, it all clicked into place. It wasn't a con, it was a rescue mission. She had lied to get close to him because the legal system and men like William would never have let a poor, single woman near a billionaire's ward. She had sacrificed her integrity to be near her blood. She had taken a humiliating job, scrubbed floors, and endured his insults just to sing lullabies to her brother. William felt the air leave his lungs. He slumped back in the chair, overwhelmed by a wave of nausea. He wasn't the protector, he was the jailer. He had kept a brother and sister apart. He had humiliated a woman who possessed a courage he couldn't even fathom. The shocking truth rewrote every interaction they had ever had. The money test? She didn't take it because she didn't want his money. She wanted her brother. The storm? She protected him because he was her family. Tears, hot and unfamiliar, pricked William's eyes. He thought of the insults he had hurled at her. Predator, fraud, trash. Every word was a sin. He had been so arrogant, so blinded by his class and his suspicion, that he missed the purest love story unfolding right under his nose. He looked at the photo of a young Harper, holding the baby boy, the same photo she likely kept in her locket. The resemblance was undeniable now that he knew to look for it. He drove back to the city in a daze. The life-changing discovery had shattered his ego. He looked at the passenger seat where the file lay. It was an indictment of his character. He had almost destroyed a family. He thought of the boy starving himself at home, waiting for his sister. William had been the villain in their story. The guilt was crushing, but with the guilt came a clarity he had never possessed. He knew what he had to do. He couldn't undo the past, but he could fix the future. He had to find her, not to arrest her, but to beg. The drama had reached its peak now. The hard road to redemption began. He gripped the steering wheel, driving faster than he ever had. He had a family to reunite. Returning to the silent mansion, William Morris walked like a ghost. He went straight to the nursery. The boy was asleep, fitful and pale, clutching the bear. William sat on the floor, watching him, the file of truth heavy in his hands. He saw the boy differently now. He wasn't just a ward, he was Harper's brother. He was half of a whole that William had arrogantly split apart. The heartbreaking realization of the pain he had caused was a physical weight on his shoulders. He replayed every moment with Harper Davis. The way she looked at the boy, the lullabies, the desperate scream when she was dragged away. It was all unconditional love, and he had treated it like a crime. He felt a loathing for himself that was deep and bitter. He was a billionaire, a success, yet he was morally bankrupt compared to Harper. She had nothing but love, and she gave it all. He had everything, and he gave nothing but rules. He poured a drink but didn't drink it. He just stared at the amber liquid. How do you apologize for stealing a life? He realized that Harper hadn't just wanted a job. She wanted to be a mother figure, a sister, a guardian. She had sacrificed her identity, risked jail, risked everything. That level of devotion was something William had never experienced, and he had stomped on it with his expensive shoes. The devastation was total. He realized his fiancée, Jessica, with her mockery of Harper's poverty, was right about the shoes but wrong about the soul. Harper was the richest person he had ever met. He cried then. For the first time in years, the icy billionaire wept. He wept for the boy's loneliness, for Harper's pain, and for his own blindness. It was a tear-jerker moment of private reckoning. He knew he couldn't just call her back. A phone call was an insult after what he did. He had to go to her. He had to enter her world, just as she had tried to enter his. He had to humble himself. The redemption required a pilgrimage. He looked at the address on her real Philia rundown apartment complex on the other side of the city, a place he would never normally go. He spent the night watching over the boy, promising him in whispers that he would fix it. "She's coming back." He whispered a vow. "I promise." The boy didn't wake, but he seemed to settle, as if hearing the promise in his dreams. William realized that his destiny was no longer about accumulating wealth. It was about facilitating this family reunion. By dawn, he was a changed man. The arrogance was burned away by shame. He dressed not in his usual suit, but in simpler clothes. He grabbed the file. He grabbed the boy's favorite bear. He was going to bring her home. He was going to rewrite the ending of this drama. He was terrified she would slam the door in his face, and he knew he would deserve it, but he had to try. For the boy, and he realized with a jolt for himself, because he loved her too. The neighborhood was gray, a stark contrast to the manicured greens of the estate. William Morris parked his luxury car a block away, feeling out of place. He walked to the address, his heart hammering against his ribs like a prisoner trying to escape. The building was old, the paint peeling. This was where Harper Davis lived. This was a reality she returned to after he threw her out. The guilt stabbed him afresh. He climbed the stairs. The creaking would announcing his arrival. He stood before door 4B. He hesitated. What if she refused? What if she hated him? He deserved her hate. He took a deep breath and knocked. The sound echoed in the hallway. Silence. Then slow footsteps. The door opened a crack, the chain still on. Harper's face appeared, pale, eyes red-rimmed, looking exhausted and broken. When she saw him, her eyes widened in fear. She tried to slam the door, thinking he was there to press charges, to finish the job of destroying her. "Go away," she cried. "I have nothing left. Leave me alone." But William jammed his foot in the doorknob aggressively, but desperately. "Harper, please. I'm not here to hurt you. Please." His voice was raw, lacking its usual command. It was a plea. She stopped, sensing the change in his tone. "What do you want?" She sobbed, peering through the crack. "I know," he said, holding up the file. "I know everything. I know he's your brother." The silence that followed was absolute. Harper opened the door slowly, the chain sliding off. She looked at him, waiting for the handcuffs, for the yelling. But she saw only a man on his knees, metaphorically and almost literally. "I am so sorry," William said, his voice breaking. "I am so sorry." He stepped into the small, humble apartment. It was clean but sparse. He saw the sacrifice in every corner. "I was blind. I was cruel. I didn't see the love. I only saw the lie." He handed her the file. "I'm not here to fire you. I'm not here to arrest you. I'm here to beg you." He told her about the boy and not eating, the depression, the calling for her. Harper gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "He needs you," William said, tears shining in his eyes. And, "I need you." The confession hung in the air, a shocking vulnerability. "I have a big house, Harper, but it's empty. You filled it. You and your brother." He offered her not just a job back, but a partnership. Come back, not as a nanny, as his sister, as family. It was a life-changing offer. Harper looked at this powerful billionaire standing awkwardly in her kitchen, stripping away his pride to make things right. She saw the redemption in his eyes. She saw the regret. And beneath it all, she saw the romance that had been suppressed by mistrust. She didn't say yes immediately. She let him stand there, let him feel the weight of her pain. But then she thought of her brother. She thought of the boy waiting. And she looked at William, really looked at him, and saw that the ice had melted. "Take me to him," she whispered. It was the beginning of the end of their pain. The love story was back on track, fueled by forgiveness and truth. The drive back to the estate was quiet, but it was a companionable silence. When they pulled up to the gates, they didn't look like prison bars to Harper Davis. Anymore, they looked like the entrance to a home. William Morris led her inside, his hand hovering near the small of her back, a gesture of respect and protection. They walked up the stairs to the nursery. The door was open. The boy was lying in bed, staring at the wall. He looked so small. Harper let out a choked sob. "Hey," she whispered. The boy froze. He turned his head slowly, as if afraid it was a dream. When he saw her, really saw her, his face transformed. It was like the sun breaking through a storm. "Harper!" He screamed, scrambling out of bed. He launched himself into her arms. Harper caught him, falling to her knees, burying her face in his neck. They cried together, a mess of limbs and tears and relief. I missed you, the boy sobbed. "I'm never leaving again," Harper promised, rocking him. Never. It was the ultimate family reunion, a scene of unconditional love. So pure it made the room glow. William stood in the doorway, watching them. Tears streamed down his face, unashamed. He realized that this connection was the only true wealth. He walked over and knelt beside them. The boy looked at William, then at Harper. He reached out and grabbed William's hand, pulling him into the circle. It was a silent forgiveness. A bridge built. "Harper," William said softly, when the tears had subsided. He took her hand. "I don't want you to just work here. I want you to live here. This is your home. He is your brother. And I..." He paused, looking deep into her eyes. "I don't want to be without you either." It was a declaration, a romance blooming from the ashes of conflict. Stay, as family, as everything. Harper looked at him, seeing the man behind the billions. She saw his heart, finally open. She smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that lit up the room. "Okay," she said. "Okay." The story ended not with a contract, but with an embrace. 3 broken people, a lonely boy, a struggling sister, and a cold billionaire had found redemption in each other. They were a patchwork family, stitched together by sacrifice and destiny. As the camera pulls back, leaving them in the warm light of the nursery, we know that the drama is over and the real love story has just begun. The tear-jerker journey had led them to the only destination that mattered: home. Money can build walls, but as Harper and William showed us, it takes love to build a home. Their journey is a powerful reminder that the truth, no matter how painful, is the only foundation strong enough to hold a family together, and that redemption is always waiting for those brave enough to ask for it. If you also believe that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in the people we fight to protect, then you have found your tribe. Subscribe now and join a community that values heart over status and courage over comfort. Now, I have 3 quick missions for you. Hit that like button to honor Harper's incredible sacrifice. Drop a comment below telling me, do you think you could have forgiven William as quickly as Harper did? And share this video with someone who needs a reminder that it's never too late to fix a broken family. And while the credits roll, don't let the emotion end here. Our channel is a treasure chest of stories, just like this one. Dive into our previous videos to uncover other journeys of unconditional love and shocking twists. And to ensure you don't miss the next heart-pounding narrative we're cooking up, turn on that notification bell right now. You won't want to be left out of the emotions coming next.